and all of the exciting things that come with that. I think what's really fascinating is I've had just some really interesting conversations over the last few weeks or so over how people are looking at inventory management. And one of the most interesting things is as we're kind of moving into, the third and fourth quarter, how we think about inventory becomes a very important topic, mostly because we need to be thinking about what we're bringing in for fall and ultimately how it is we're going to be looking at, sales and POSs and holiday inventory planning. So today, what I think will be really important is for all of us to kind of take a step back and look at kind of consistent sales projections and how we're planning out our POS and markdown calendars. And so what does that look like? Well, in essence, if I am thinking about, how the fall is going to be working for me on my e-commerce platform, I'm likely going to be spending some time thinking about not only what my trajectory of sales have been the last few months, but also certainly where I think my marketing channels are going to have me land in terms of traffic, et cetera, and conversion, right? So really important to kind of understand what your sales and marketing strategies are and how you can start to do strategic inventory buys based on that. So oftentimes, guys, like people are not thinking about how inventory is actually necessitated by sales and marketing. More often than not, people actually think that, inventory is actually something that you just plan for and then you figure out how to do sales and marketing afterwards. So the way in which we've really thought about sales and marketing strategy is kind of flipped, right? We need to be taking this from a very different perspective, looking at it from the standpoint of what are my sales and marketing strategies, and then how am I going to back end those strategies into my inventory buys and what those look like. So what's really cool is actually a really fascinating conversation with some folks who really leverage heavily the off-price channels. And what I thought was so interesting about off-price, was that and off-price meaning off-price trade show, what I thought was so interesting about it is that you can basically sell in-season merchandise at a discounted rate to retailers who are looking to get ATS right now. And for a lot of you guys right now who have maybe been sitting on some canceled POs and you're wondering what to do about your inventory, being able to have another channel to be able to sell that ATS is really important, especially when you're wondering how on earth you're going to be able to kind of get new buyers or new visibility on existing inventory in stock. So I would say from a strategic standpoint, as you're looking at inventory, the biggest components, right, are going to be to figure out, right, like what are the sales and marketing channels, right? So start to figure out, am I doing a gifting program? Am I looking at, am I looking at doing any giveaways? Am I going to be focusing on driving traffic through e-com? And then as you're looking at your initial kind of positioning of inventory, your very first questions are going to be, well, what are my channels of sales? So am I purely e-commerce based? Am I going to be doing things that are specifically into the wholesale market? Obviously, if you're focused on wholesale, which is still a really good market. I mean, I just had a conversation with 3 different business owners whose businesses are doing better now, right, than they were last year. So like the fact that people are kind of wondering about business trajectory and all of those things, I think is really fascinating because actually business today has the opportunity to be considerably stronger. But guys, as you're looking at maybe initial kind of inventory positioning and initial buys, the most important thing will be to realize, okay, what channels am I selling on? Right? Well, how many SKUs am I looking at? What are some of the, minimums? So oftentimes we have these factory minimums that we have to adhere to. So maybe it's 50 units a SKU or 100 units a SKU. I have to tell you, my number one favorite thing to do, guys, is to buy smaller minimums with less margins as I'm launching something so I can actually get a test for the market. I can actually understand how things are going to be performing. Now, later today, I'll be doing kind of a group session a 1 hour kind of private, if you will, with a few people through Embark Live. And we're going to be going over some very specific inventory management tools, right? So how do you start to implement that specifically for your business? And if you guys are interested in joining for that 1 hour call, I would say definitely head over to Embark Live and make sure that you sign up. Because being able to kind of go through your own specific business model, I think is really, really valuable. But as a general rule of thumb, right, you're going to have your factory minimums and your factory considerations. And given those factory considerations, you're then going to have to figure out, how am I actually going to sell through those goods? And if you have the opportunity to offshore your production at a much lower minimum, for your costing, in terms of cost price, if it's very low, you have to ask yourself, if I'm going to now be sitting on 1,000 more units, even though those units are marginally, cheaper, do I have a built up business model, marketing strategy, or plan that's going to facilitate selling through those units at, let's say, a 90% sell through, right? Which is what we're kind of all hoping for, is for that magic kind of magic sell through number. So that, I think, is an important thing to consider. I think, how you want to start pre-building or pre-marketing your inventory buys in terms of making sure you have an audience. Yes, you can certainly do pre-selling, though pre-selling, guys, is not my favorite mode of growing business. And the reason why I say that is because pre-selling business is not going to be something that happens easily without necessarily having the right kind of built up budget to build an audience. And so talked about it yesterday, it was this notion of audience building that you're going to convert. Yes, you can absolutely start by building an audience that you're going to convert later on. But the issue with audience building is that it's expensive. Why is it expensive? Well, think of it like this. Not only are you going to be building out an audience specifically related to, let's say, a website, a URL, a domain, the content you're going to be building, you're going to be spending your time developing that content. Maybe it's you going on Instagram, you're building collaborations. Like, you can't just market someone something that is not heavily branded, right? You need to make sure that whatever it is you're putting out there is well branded and well represented of who you are. So when you say I'm going to do list building, I want very specific ideas here on how on earth you're actually planning on building a list. It's not simply that I have a landing page. It's not simply that you're building a generic Instagram feed. You have to have a unique point of view that is consistent. You have to be actively engaging in communities and networks, right, in order to be building up an audience. So when we ask ourselves, well, how do we do that? I'm asking you, are you going to take time away from actually building out your launch strategy to do this? Are you going to take time away from actually building out your business modeling? What are you sacrificing in this process of list building, right, that you actually need to be focusing on? Now, if your team is big enough and you're able to actually, let's say, focus on a few different areas of your business, then yes, kind of going after it in that capacity is great. But the notion of like pre-selling, I think, is one that needs to be kind of unboxed a little bit more. We have to have a better recognition or idea of the fact that doing a pre-selling model or doing a list building model actually may push you a bit further out from your launch than you may actually think. And that, I think, is really important. It's not necessarily going to be something that helps you get to that finish line faster. Though, if you are willing to kind of push that out a bit further, right? If you're willing to, if you're willing to kind of, go another, let's say 6-9 months outside of your launch, then doing kind of community activations and doing those kinds of audience building strategies, I think, are really important and really valuable. Okay, so what else about inventory? Well, inventory analysis and looking at your merchandising and your sales documents are something you guys should be doing on a weekly or monthly basis, depending on your existing volume. So what does that look like? Well, if we're thinking about existing volume and we're thinking about how business actually converts, you're going to be looking at things like your on hand, your on order, your BOMs, your beginning of month, your end of month. and you're going to start to get a flow for sell through and for inventory movement, right? So those kinds of reporting tools and techniques are important, because if you do not understand how inventory is flowing in your business, you actually won't have the ability to forecast it out going forward. So get really comfortable with Microsoft Excel. A lot of people rely too much on Shopify to be able to support their business analytics. And to be honest, the Shopify reports are like, okay, they're not that great. You know, my favorite thing is actually just to export data and to work on it through Excel. I think that's really the best ways in which you'll be able to manipulate and understand your information. And also know that as a business owner, being able to be comfortable in Excel and being able to be comfortable with some light analysis is super important. And if you're not comfortable with it, then I would sign up for a, Microsoft Excel class. I think that that's really important. So anyway, those are some tools and techniques around kind of looking at your data, looking at your inventory. Inventory isn't sexy, but it actually helps you make better decisions. So when you guys are thinking about POSs, right? So point of sale discounts or markdowns, a lot of that is going to be based on, what is it that you are actually, sitting heavy on? What are the slow movers? And then how do you kind of identify those slow movers and then take strategic action against that? So what is strategic action? Well, strategic action is anything from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to put this on a POS, or I'm going to put this on a markdown for the next 6 months, or I'm going to put this on POS for the weekend. So you're going to get some ideas around that based on your inventory position. You're also going to get ideas in terms of, what do I put on my newsletter? What do I need to promote on social? All of that information, it's not just willy-nilly, right? It's not just what you think. It's actually heavily rooted in your inventory. So if you have a small amount of inventory, you may not necessarily want to promote it, because you might end up seeing stock outs, right? Seeing high sell-throughs, and then all of a sudden you're losing customers, right? Because you don't actually have the inventory to support the sales. Similarly, right, when you're looking at things that you are going to be promoting on social or even on the newsletter, maybe you have to fake a bestseller and say, hey, that item that I'm actually sitting the most inventory on that isn't moving, maybe that's my new kind of quote unquote bestseller. And maybe I'm going to go ahead and say that's my bestseller on my email in order to help drum up business and get people to purchase, right? So remember, bestsellers and things like that are marketing tools, right? They're not necessarily the things that are going to be 100% true to how your inventory looks. So I think that that's also very important. And then simultaneously with that, guys, as you're looking at inventory management, you also want to take a look at, like, okay, inventory comes in, let's say in February or March, and then you're going to sell, let's say you have 2 collections a year. You're then going to plan out your inventory in such a way where you're looking at the sell-through in those few months, right? What that sell-through looks like. And then at a certain point in time, you're going to mark it down. So then you have your markdowns, and you have a new set of inventory that comes in, and this kind of slowly starts to decrease in terms of the sales. It goes like this. Your new merchandise comes in, and hopefully that starts to pick up, right? So at a certain point in time, right, you're kind of going like this with your sales. At the peak of your season, you're going up like this, and then this other category, which is last season, is going down, and then you phase it out. This starts to go like this, and then you have a new set of inventory that comes in like that, right? So I know that's like a little complicated, and there's a little bit of some of my dance moves, my retail dance moves. But guys, if you're thinking about how to if you're thinking about how to manage inventory, if you're thinking about how to actually make this very strategic, I think it's extremely, extremely important and really valuable that you take the time to actually get to know, like, what are my merchandising flows are going to look like, right? Like, how am I actually going to be building consensus for that, right? Like what makes sense as I'm moving through my my cycles here. And so as you're kind of starting to build that out, every brand is going to be different. You know, unfortunately, when it comes to looking at you know, customized plans for marketing and sales and inventory management, unfortunately, it's one of those things where we don't always realize that like my business model is different than your business model, is different than someone else's business model. So being able to kind of sit down and kind of go over in more depth, like these are my key merchandised collections or drops during the year. These are my projected sell-throughs. These are the ways in which I think business is going to, these are the ways in which I think my business is going to ebb and flow over the next few months. And then this is how I actually project inventory. It's going to help you so much, especially as many of you guys are thinking about, you know, especially as you guys are thinking about like, how am I renegotiating with my factories? Well, if you don't actually know kind of what your factory relationships or like orders are going to look like, being able to have a model and a flow of your inventory management and stock positioning is actually going to help you negotiate better, right? It's going to help you negotiate better because ultimately at the end of the day, you are going to be able to get a better rate because you're showing them the bulk of what it is you're going to be buying, right? As opposed to not the bulk, right? And just looking at it collection by collection. So that I think is my biggest, that I think is kind of my biggest thing right now, right? It's making sure that you guys are able to get the best sort of negotiated deals with your factories, making sure that you're not sitting on a lot of inventory, that you have a strategic plan to sell through each of your collections. And then ultimately, I think being able to stay agile and have multiple revenue streams by which you can liquidate and sell through inventory. So knowing that you have a touch point in e-com, that you have a touch point, let's say on Instagram shopping. I know everyone's on Instagram shopping. You have another touch point maybe on as like a wholesale account. Maybe you guys are selling ATS and you're working with like the retailers that walk the off-price show. All of those different kind of wheelhouses that you are looking at, I think, are really important, and that I think is valuable. So it's not just, you know, how much inventory do I have or how do I predict that. It is more so around how do I build out this inventory management strategy, right? That's going to then support these channels of business so that I know, like, when I'm going to have to execute on those different models, right? The wholesale selling is going to happen to regular retail in advance of your production. Then you have production, and then you're going to go live on your e-com, and then you're going to go live on selling on Instagram shopping, right? Then you might also be selling your ATS, right? Well, what happens when you kind of finalize or round out, you know, that particular selling season? What's going to happen with all of those newly aged goods, right? Those are really important questions and things to consider as you guys are planning out for the next year. Now, what I thought was also really fascinating is, you know, this conversation that I had earlier with these different retailers and brands. What I thought was really interesting is hearing about how many brands actually are doing extremely well right now. And the reason why I want to bring this up again is that there is a huge opportunity, guys, for many of you to be able to actually like find other areas of being able to either move upstream in the market in terms of introducing higher and more luxury goods, or move downstream in the market and start to introduce other products and categories that are going to capture lower hanging fruit. And so however you guys choose to go, up market or down market, right, there's an additional revenue stream depending on where your business is at. And so that I think is also super important to realize, right? What are those additional revenue streams? And how can I take my inventory and my vendor relationships and actually kind of navigate a business model that's actually going to help me make more money while capturing a larger part of the market or a more profitable part of the market. So remember, it's not necessarily larger market means more profitable. Maybe it's per unit on the mass, it could be profitable, but you're also looking at, market share in terms of if I'm moving up market, well, maybe it's fewer customers, but maybe it's like your best customers that you're selling higher margin products to, so fewer quantity. If you're moving down market, maybe it's lower gross margin percentages, but you're looking at wider distribution to kind of gain a much larger market share. The other thing that I will say, guys, as you're looking at kind of liquidation opportunities, reselling opportunities, be mindful of your drop shipment opportunities and what those mean for your business. Be very selective about who you choose to do drop shipment with. That is another potential. People see that as like a sales channel. I see it as a marketing channel. So if any of you guys are on drop shipment platforms and you're expecting to see high amounts of revenue coming off of that, I would say hold your horses and start to think about inventory management as like, this is a marketing channel and I may or may not actually sell anything on this. So that is my perspective. All right, guys, that's kind of it for me on inventory management. I mean, I know that it's like such an interesting topic. It's certainly not the most sexy of the topics that we've covered. But guys, without inventory, you've got no business, right? Nothing to sell. So knowing how you're approaching inventory management, I think will help you make smarter decisions. It'll help you as you're managing your purchase orders, expectations. It'll also help you align on your channels of distribution. And guys, if you have additional kind of questions very specific to your business and coming up with a inventory management cycle, markdown cadence, any of those things, make sure that you sign up to be a part of our conversation today. That's going to be a bit more intimate, kind of going over those specifics around your business. All right, guys. Well, that is it from me. Excited to be here as usual. Okay, we got a couple questions floating, and you guys always do this at the end. Okay. Do you use an inventory management template on Excel or make a custom one? I more typically will build one depending on the type of client I have. So the components are always the same. So you're always looking at your BOM, your beginning of month, your end of month, your sell-through calculations, your weeks of supply you're looking at with inventory management. You might also be looking at your average unit retail. So there are a couple of key benchmarks that you definitely want to keep in mind. However, it is going to vary from brand to brand in terms of what are the key drivers that your particular business is keen on tracking. Okay, inventory management strategy. Should I consider using a fulfillment company? How well is that tied to Instagram shopping or my website? Yeah, fulfillment centers are amazing, especially if you have no desire to open up a warehouse in your garage. Fulfillment management. So here's the thing that's really interesting is depending on the 3PL, the third-party logistics center that you work with, they may also have, their Shopify might plug into their WMS, so their warehouse management system. And depending on whether or not that warehouse management system is something that is going to work for you is going to really depend on how SKU heavy and how SKU intense your product is. So when you're looking at fulfillment, your Instagram shopping as of now is kind of tied to your existing fulfillment and warehousing through Shopify. If that is, what you're using, then it's tied through there. What's really cool, right, is Shopify is going to be moving into inventory management, and they'll be moving into kind of that 3PL space. So watch out for more fully integrated Shopify kind of running competitively to Amazon in terms of warehouse management, and also running competitively to many other 3PLs. JB, your question around inventory, around using a 3PL or fulfillment center, ultimately really rests on the fact of what kind of volume you plan on doing. And again, what your marketing and sales strategy is. So if you're not planning on selling a lot of volume, you can certainly do your launch from your garage. But if you have a high volume launch plan and there's a small company or a small team of you guys, then let me be the first to tell you that pick, pack, and fulfillment is not something you're going to want to be doing. In fact, you are going to drive yourself crazy by doing that. right? Like you are not going to want to do that at all. So save yourself like a major headache. If you're going to do a high volume business, go with a 3PL. If you are concerned about doing a high volume business, you think it's going to be a small launch, do it from your garage and no one will be any the wiser. All right, guys, that's all for me. I am Shama again with Scaling Retail. I am so excited to be working with Embark Live and be hosting these weekly calls. Hopefully I'll get a chance to meet many of you guys in some of our small group working sessions. But otherwise, please be well. Please use your inventory wisely. Be strategic. More important than me ever telling you what to do or what the checklist is helping you guys understand how to think. JB, my time is up, but if you're interested in kind of doing something in our small group session, that'll be happening later today, and we can go over some of your specifics on what it is that you need for your business. So excited to be able to continue that conversation. All right, guys, I will talk to you later. Have a wonderful day. Bye.